Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. I used to think my life was nearly perfect. I had built a stable career, provided a comfortable home, and surrounded myself with people I believed were loyal. For years, I had thought I was doing everything right. I worked hard, came home to my wife and children, and trusted my closest friend, a man I had considered more like a brother than just a buddy. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was, how blind I had been to the small cracks that were forming in the foundation of my so-called perfect life. It all began with suspicion, the kind of suspicion you don't want to admit to yourself. My kids, whom I loved dearly, were growing older, and people often commented on how much they resembled my best friend. At first, I laughed it off, brushed it aside as coincidence. After all, he spent a lot of time with us. Barbecues, family vacations, birthdays. He was practically a part of our family, so of course the kids would pick up his mannerisms, right? That's what I told myself over and over, even when doubts kept whispering at the back of my mind. The turning point came one evening when I was cleaning out the garage. I found an old photo album stuffed between boxes. Flipping through it, I saw countless pictures of my friend with my children, at the park, holding them as babies, even moments I didn't remember being present for myself. Something in me snapped. The smile on his face, the way he looked at them, almost as if they were his. It gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I ordered DNA test kits. It felt almost ridiculous at first, like something people did only in movies or dramatic TV shows, but I couldn't sleep without knowing. I took samples from myself and my children quietly, without telling anyone. I mailed them off, and the days waiting for results felt like months. Every morning, I checked my email obsessively, my stomach twisting with dread. When the results finally came, the world as I knew it shattered. None of the children I had raised were biologically mine. Every single one belonged to my best friend. I remember staring at the screen, the words blurring as my chest tightened. For years I had been living a lie. For years my trust had been broken in the cruelest way possible. At first, I couldn't breathe. Rage mixed with heartbreak until I felt paralyzed. I walked through the house that night in silence, looking at the framed pictures on the walls, the toys scattered across the floor, the little reminders of a life I had built with people who had deceived me all along. Every laugh, every hug, every family moment suddenly felt poisoned. The next morning, I confronted my wife. I didn't go in yelling. I was too broken for that. I simply placed the results in front of her on the kitchen table. She froze, her face draining of color, and then came the tears. She tried to explain, to twist the story, to tell me it wasn't what I thought. But the paper in my hand told me everything I needed to know. The betrayal was undeniable. Later, I called my so-called best friend. At first, he pretended not to understand, but when I told him what I had discovered, his silence confirmed everything. It wasn't just a mistake. It had been a deliberate betrayal that lasted years. I thought of the countless times he had shaken my hand, toasted to our friendship, looked me in the eye and called me brother, all while hiding the ugliest secret imaginable. Days turned into weeks as the reality sank in. My wife begged me not to leave, begged me to think of the children. She said, "You're their father in every way that matters." And maybe to some extent she was right. I had been the one to raise them, to provide for them, to teach them how to ride bikes and read bedtime stories. But the betrayal was too deep. And then came the worst blow of all, when they both, my wife and my former best friend, expected me to continue footing the bill for everything. They wanted me to pay for the kids' college, for their wedding someday, as if nothing had changed. As if I was supposed to swallow the betrayal and just keep writing checks because I had money and they needed it. That was the moment when my heartbreak hardened into resolve. I realized I had been used for years, financially and emotionally. I wasn't just betrayed, I was played. Every dollar I had spent, every sacrifice I had made, had gone to support a lie. That wasn't fatherhood. That was fraud. So I did the unthinkable. I cut them off. No more financial support. No more pretending everything was fine. I contacted a lawyer, explained the situation, and filed a lawsuit for paternity fraud. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life, and the years that had been stolen from me. When the lawsuit papers were delivered, the storm truly began. My wife screamed at me, saying I was cruel, saying I was destroying the family. My friend tried to call me, left me long voicemails filled with half apologies and excuses, but I was done listening. My heart had turned cold. In the quiet that followed, I realized what I had to do. I couldn't stay there, surrounded by reminders of betrayal. So I packed a bag, withdrew from the noise, and disappeared. I left behind the house, the chaos, and the people who had shattered my trust. I vanished into a new life, determined never to be found. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of freedom. The pain was still raw, but with each passing day, I reminded myself that I had survived the worst truth imaginable. And though the scars would remain, I would rebuild, on my own terms, away from lies. When I walked away from that house, I thought the hardest part was behind me. I believed that leaving would be the final chapter, that distance would heal the wounds. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't just vanish because you decide to disappear. It lingers. It echoes in your head when you try to sleep, and it follows you when you try to start over. At first, I stayed in a small rented apartment far from the neighborhood I once called home. It was nothing like the house I'd worked so hard to buy, nothing like the life I had built. But for me, it was freedom. A mattress on the floor, a second-hand couch, and 4 bare walls felt like luxury compared to the suffocating lie I had lived in. Every night I sat in silence, staring at those walls, wondering how I hadn't seen it sooner. But quiet never lasts. News of what I had done spread quickly. My phone blew up with messages, some from family, others from mutual friends, all of them demanding answers. Some called me heartless for walking away from the children. Some accused me of overreacting, telling me to forgive for the sake of peace. None of them knew the truth the way I did. They hadn't seen the DNA results, they hadn't been stabbed in the back by the 2 people they trusted most. Then came the letters from my wife. Page after page of apologies mixed with anger, begging me to come back one moment and accusing me of cowardice the next. She wrote about how I was tearing the family apart and abandoning the children who still needed me. But she never once took responsibility. Not once did she admit the depth of the betrayal or acknowledge the years of lies. Instead, she tried to twist the story until I was the villain. And my so-called best friend? He went quiet at first. Then one night, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was shaky, almost rehearsed. He started with excuses. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to go this far. It was complicated. I let him talk, every word fueling the anger inside me. Then came the line that sealed my decision forever. But you're better off raising them than me. You always had the money. That was when it hit me. It hadn't been about love. It hadn't been about a mistake. It was about convenience. I had been nothing more than a bank account, a provider, a safety net for someone else's choices. And that realization burned deeper than anything else. I hung up and never answered his calls again. Meanwhile, the lawsuit for paternity fraud moved forward. My lawyer warned me it wouldn't be easy. Courts don't always side with men in cases like mine, even when the truth is undeniable. But I was determined. I presented the DNA evidence, the timeline, the years of financial support I had unknowingly given. It wasn't just about money. It was about justice, about proving that my life had been stolen piece by piece. My wife fought back, of course. She painted herself as the victim, saying I had known all along, that I had accepted the children as mine. She even tried to argue that since I had played the role of father, I should continue to pay, no matter what biology said. Her lawyer echoed the same tired lines. The children's well-being comes first. They used guilt as a weapon, hoping I would crumble under the weight of it. But I didn't. I refused to let their manipulation pull me back in. I stood firm in court, recounting how I had been deceived for years, how I had invested not just money, but my heart and soul into a family that was built on lies. I spoke calmly, but every word carried the weight of betrayal. Friends I had known for decades turned against me. They couldn't understand how I could walk away. Some whispered that I was cruel, that I was punishing innocent children, but none of them asked the real question. What about me? What about the man who had given everything, only to find out he had been tricked into fatherhood? Wasn't my pain worth something too? Through it all, I kept my distance. I avoided the places we used to go. I stopped answering calls from anyone tied to my old life. It was like ripping out roots that had been planted for years. But it was the only way to survive. The children, though, they were the hardest part. I had raised them, kissed scraped knees, stayed up during sleepless nights, taught them how to tie their shoes. None of that was fake. My bond with them was real, even if biology wasn't. And walking away from them nearly broke me. But I had to remind myself that the lies weren't mine to fix. I hadn't created this mess. Their mother and my so-called friend had. One afternoon, months after I left, I received a letter from the oldest child. The handwriting was shaky, the words clumsy, but raw. They wrote, "Why did you leave? Don't you love us anymore?" That letter sat on my desk for days. I must have read it 100 times. Tears blurred the ink until the words nearly vanished. It wasn't their fault. They hadn't asked to be born into lies. They hadn't asked for the deceit. But how could I explain to them the truth without shattering their entire world? How could I tell them that their real father wasn't me, but the man who had betrayed me? In the end, I wrote back only one sentence. "I will always love you, but I cannot live in lies anymore." It was the most painful letter I had ever written. The trial dragged on. Months turned into a year. Every court date was a battlefield of accusations, each side trying to twist the truth to their advantage. My wife claimed emotional damage, my friend stayed hidden from the proceedings, and I stood there, exhausted but unbroken. Then came the ruling. The court acknowledged the DNA results, acknowledged the deception. While they couldn't erase the years I had been tricked into supporting the children, they released me from all future obligations. No more college tuition, no more wedding expenses, no more monthly support checks. For the first time in years, I was free, legally and financially. But freedom doesn't come without cost. My reputation was scarred. The friendships I had built for decades were gone. My family relationships were strained. And the children, though they didn't understand it at the time, now looked at me with confusion, sometimes even resentment. I had won the case, but I had lost almost everything else. Yet in that silence after the storm, I felt a strange sense of relief. The chains were gone. The mask had fallen. And though my heart ached for what I had lost, I also knew this. I would never again allow myself to be deceived so deeply. I began rebuilding slowly. I took trips alone, rediscovered old hobbies I had abandoned. I read books late into the night, trying to fill the void with knowledge and self-discovery. I started new routines, little things that reminded me I was alive. Cooking meals just for myself, jogging in the mornings, watching sunsets without anyone beside me. People thought I had vanished, and in a way I had. But I wasn't running anymore. I was healing, one scar at a time. And deep inside, a quiet fire burned. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just pain. It was the determination to rise again, to prove to myself that betrayal wouldn't define me forever. The story wasn't over yet. The court battle was over, the papers signed, the ties severed. But what comes after a storm? Silence. An almost unbearable silence that makes you question whether you've done the right thing. For a while, I drifted. I woke up every morning in my small apartment with no reason to rush, no family to attend to, no chaos to manage. The quiet was foreign. I thought I'd longed for peace, but when it came, it felt suffocating. It forced me to sit with myself, to confront the years of betrayal, the wasted effort, and the hollow spaces where trust used to be. At first, I filled the emptiness with anger. Anger was easier to hold than grief. I replayed every memory with my best friend, the handshakes, the late-night talks, the shared dreams, all of them stained by what he had done. I remembered every smile from my wife, every time she'd said, "I love you," knowing now that her words had been half-truths. The fury burned bright, and I used it like fuel just to get through each day. But anger is a fire that eats everything in its path, including you. I realized I couldn't live like that forever. If I did, then their betrayal would still control me, even from afar. So I began searching for something else, something to rebuild me. It started small. I picked up a journal and began writing every night. At first, it was just rage poured onto paper, but eventually it became reflection. I wrote about the mistakes I had made, the red flags I had ignored, the lessons I should have learned sooner. Then I started writing about hope. What kind of life I wanted from here. What kind of man I wanted to become. I changed my routines too. I stopped checking my phone obsessively, stopped waiting for letters that only reopened wounds. I joined a gym, took long runs on quiet roads, pushed my body until sweat replaced sorrow. The more I disciplined myself physically, the more control I gained mentally. Months turned into a year. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again, but a stronger version, forged by betrayal. I made new friends, not through forced connections or old ties, but through shared interests. People who didn't know my past, who didn't carry the weight of the lies I had lived through. With them, I could just be me. No explanations, no history, just present. But healing isn't a straight line. There were nights when memories returned like waves, crashing against me with brutal force. Nights when I'd see the children's faces in my dreams, asking why I had left. Nights when I'd wake up drenched in guilt, wondering if I could have handled things differently. I carried that pain with me, and maybe I always will. But I learned to let it remind me of the strength I had gained, rather than the loss I had endured. Meanwhile, whispers of my old life reached me. My wife, now ex-wife, struggled without the financial support. She had to downsize, give up the lifestyle she had once flaunted. My former best friend, the man who had pretended to be my brother, found himself cornered by responsibilities he had avoided for years. College tuition, medical bills, everyday expenses, all of it landed on his shoulders now. And from what I heard, he wasn't handling it well. I didn't take joy in their suffering, not at first. But there was a strange sense of justice in watching reality catch up to them. For so long they had lived comfortably at my expense, but now they had to face the consequences of their choices. That, to me, was the real revenge. Not screaming, not fighting, but walking away and letting the truth do its work. Still, I wanted more for myself than just watching them crumble. I didn't want my life to be defined by bitterness. So I began investing in my future. I took courses, expanded my career, built new streams of income. Every dollar I made now was mine, truly mine, not swallowed by lies. I traveled too. Places I had always wanted to see but had never taken the chance because family obligations always came first. Standing on cliffs overlooking oceans, walking through cities where no one knew my name, I felt the chains break piece by piece. The more I grew, the less I thought of them. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer controlled me. Their names became like faded ink, their faces blurred in my memory. I no longer cared to know what they were doing. My life was finally mine. Then, one evening, years later, I ran into someone from the old neighborhood. At first I considered walking away, but curiosity made me pause. They looked at me with wide eyes and said, "You wouldn't believe how things turned out." I listened quietly as they told me the stories. My ex-wife, bitter and lonely, still tried to convince people she had been wronged. My ex-best friend, overwhelmed, eventually distanced himself even from the children he had fathered. And the children, grown now, carving their own paths, had slowly learned the truth. It wasn't me who had betrayed them, it was their parents. That was the moment I realized the greatest revenge wasn't what I had done to them, but what I had done for myself. I had rebuilt, I had survived. I had turned betrayal into strength, and they were still drowning in the consequences of their own lies. But the story doesn't end there. Because even after all the pain, I found something unexpected. Peace. One afternoon, while sitting by the ocean, I thought about the children again. I knew they weren't mine by blood, but love isn't always measured in DNA. I had raised them for years, given them my time, my energy, my affection. And though things had ended painfully, I chose to forgive them in my heart. Not because they had asked for it, not because they deserved it, but because forgiveness was for me. Carrying bitterness only chained me to the past, and I was ready to let it go. Forgiveness didn't mean I forgot, I would never forget. But it meant I was free to live without the weight of hatred. And in that freedom, I found something more powerful than revenge: resilience. Looking back now, I see my story not just as one of betrayal, but one of transformation. I lost everything I thought I had: my family, my best friend, my reputation. But in that loss, I gained myself. I gained clarity, strength, and the courage to start anew. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's survival. It's walking away from those who hurt you, building a life so full and strong that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. It's proving every single day that you are more than what they tried to reduce you to. So, yes, I made a DNA test and discovered the cruelest truth imaginable. Yes, I cut them off, sued for paternity fraud, and vanished. But more importantly, I rose again. I became stronger. And I built a life that no one could take from me. Because in the end, betrayal is just a chapter, not the whole story. The rest is up to you, and this was how I wrote mine. Oh,